Welcome to the Intriguing Beings podcast with me, Rou Chater. Over the last 20 years, I've been lucky enough to meet and interview a host of interesting people. This summer, I decided to record some of these conversations for a new podcast. Episode 6, with Pete Cabrinha. I was very privileged to chat to Pete at the Virgin Kitesurfing Armada earlier this year. Pete is one of Hawaii's heroes, a pioneer of the water sports out there. He had a glittering windsurfing career in the 80s and was part of the early group of riders who toe surfed the monstrous waves at Jaws. Pete has a huge passion for trying new things on the water and more recently became totally addicted to foil surfing. He picked up kiteboarding long ago, before it was even really a sport, and he's been the driving force behind one of the world's biggest kiteboarding brands, Cabrinha. We also talk about his love of art and travelling, and there are some great stories from the very early days of his windsurfing career. I learned a lot about Pete during this conversation, and I hope you do too. We recorded this one in the Ford Transit Custom van at the Virgin Kitesurfing Armada, so look out for the odd person saying hello outside, seagulls on the roof, and a few cars driving past. Pete was also suffering from a bout of flu he'd picked up on his travels around Europe, so it's a huge credit to him for doing the interview when he was feeling so under the weather. As ever, if you're enjoying these podcasts, please feel free to give them a thumbs up, share them on social media, and help me spread the word. A 5-star rating on iTunes wouldn't go amiss either. Okay, so I'm sat here very fortunately with a gentleman called Pete Cabrinha. You might have heard of him. If you're a kite surfer, you definitely heard of him, and if you surf, you've probably heard of him as well. He's one of the foremost watermen from the island of Maui. Many accolades to his name, and we thought it'd be nice to get together and have a conversation about how he got into his passion for the ocean and how he's developed that into a very formidable career and indeed a huge lifestyle. So Pete, thanks for sitting down with me today. We're just sat in the van again at the Armada, so we're going to sit here until it gets too hot. So I guess the first kind of question is, I sort of know you through kite surfing, and you know, I've met you a couple of times and I'm very aware of all your accolades and things, but how did you get into being on Maui, getting into the surf, becoming part of the ocean?
I mean, it all happened pretty naturally and sort of organically, I guess. I mean, I was born in Hawaii, and we lived not far from the beach when I was a very small kid, and just going to the beach every day was just a normal thing.
Yeah.
And so we're goofing around in the waves. Next thing you know, your dad's pushing you into waves on a surfboard, and surfing just happened at a pretty young age. I think this year marks maybe 50 years I've been surfing.
Wow.
I know, it's really funny to even think that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, at least you're good at it. If you've been doing it for 50 years and you were rubbish, then that'd be terrible. So that's a bonus.
But I guess the cool thing about surfing is you never really master it. There's always something there for you. And lately, especially with foil boarding and everything, it's just, I feel like a kid again. I mean, you're doing something that you've done for 50 years, and suddenly you're doing it again, and you're looking at 2 to 3 foot waves, and you're like, you know, how am I going to navigate this? You know, and it's just awesome fun.
I was going to get onto the foiling a little bit later, but I guess as we've brought it up, let's chat about it now because it's kind of very poignant. It's this massive movement, and if people are listening to this and they don't understand what we're going to be talking about, it's essentially attaching a hydrofoil wing to the bottom of a surfboard and then paddling into waves, which I tried in Mauritius on a paddleboard, and it was literally the most terrifying thing I've ever done. So how did it sort of start off in Maui? How did it come about, and how did you get into it?
Yeah, I mean, if we go way back to the beginning of it all, it was, I was there on the very first day when my friend Brett Lickle brought a air chair, which is a sit-down, looks like a water ski with a seat on it and a hydrofoil underneath it, and we were towing around behind a jet ski with it, and just purely for laughs. And everybody got a try on it, and you know, we're just getting bucked all over the place on the thing and just having a good laugh. And then at the very end of the day, like right before we wrapped things up, Laird was sitting on the thing, and he unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up on it.
No way.
And then the lights just went on.
It was
So Brett and Laird went back that night and took a snowboard They took the hydrofoil off the air chair.
Yeah.
And they cut a hole in the middle of the snowboard and they stuck it up in there. And then in order to mount it, they had to build this sort of pyramid of wood to stabilize the top of the
foil,
the mast.
The mast of the foil. Yeah.
Yeah, and put on a pair of snowboard boots, and
And this was a long time ago, wasn't it? This is like
I think
going
this was
back a
1990. I want to say 96.
Yeah, and you guys were towing into some pretty big waves.
Yeah, that was right at the height of the whole tow-in movement. Well, it was still sort of on its way up, I guess.
Yeah.
We started that about 93. So yeah, a few years later we did this. And so the foil thing has been around for a long time. And from that day it progressed to surfboards with a hydrofoil and snowboard boots.
Yeah.
And so we're pretty committed.
Yeah, you're in. You're not coming out.
and we're using it to tow into actually pretty big surf at the time.
Yeah. Did you ever take it out in Jaws or?
Yeah.
I think I saw some photos from there. It looked bonkers.
Yeah, I had some Jaws sessions on it. But I mean, listen, we were like channel sniffing the whole time. We were, but you could get these huge waves and get incredible speeds because the way the foils were back then, they were really made for high speed.
Yeah.
Whereas it's come full circle back to this, to where it is now, where everything has slowed itself down. The wings are made for high lift at low speeds, and the masts are a lot shorter, so you can actually paddle in and stand up on a surfboard without any foot straps or anything.
Yeah.
And have the time of your life. I mean, it's really just amazing fun.
Yeah, it looks pretty bonkers. I mean, it's certainly progressed a lot. And what's interesting, I guess, is you were there all that time ago. How did it go from that transition of you guys just heading out and about, playing around with the snowboard boots, playing around with the snowboard and the surfboard to sort of where it is now? Because it almost seemed like it stopped for a bit. It almost seemed like you guys were doing it and then it went away and then it kind of resurged into where it is now.
I'll tell you what happened. We did the foil boarding tow-ins for a while.
Yeah.
And it was pretty committed with the boots and everything. And then that made its way into kite surfing.
Yeah.
And we used pretty much the same equipment, the same board, the same boots, everything. You just towed yourself around on a kite. And same thing. It was the whole boot thing just made it a little bit kind of a lot of gear heavy.
Yeah. And quite sketchy, and you're wiping out with snowboard boots on.
Right. And when I say committed, like you were committed to a stance.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
So
you couldn't change your feet.
You couldn't change your feet, and so it just sort of like evaporated. Like it's sort of the idea of it, the trend of it, just sort of evaporated, except for like little small pockets.
Okay.
And it wasn't until Kai Lenny decided to start playing around with it again, first in stand-up paddleboarding, doing downwinders. He tried it one day and got some glides that just, again, it was a moment where the light bulbs came on, and everybody's just like, oh my God. And especially for him, he just pursued it like vigorously with smaller surfboards and everything, and it really re-sparked the interest for a lot of people, including myself.
Yeah.
When I saw that, actually, I tell you, that got me interested. And then he had another video where he was in Fiji and he rode a wave, kicked out of the wave, pumped back out, and got the second wave. And I was like,
again. Yeah, I saw that video.
This looks
amazing.
Like way too much fun.
Yeah.
And so, obviously we have already been making the
foils
foils
for the kite surfers.
So it was just pretty quick for us to just adapt.
Yeah.
And we started making wings and
getting involved.
Think of surfing or wanting to surf that don't even look like real waves.
Yeah.
Some of them are perfect for foil boarding. I mean,
So
all you
opens
really
up
need
all
to
these
do
spots.
is really paddle in and get to your feet, and then it sort of opens up this field that you can just pump from wave to wave and surf the wave in a way that you don't normally surf. Like I like to think of it as like a cross between longboarding and shortboarding, like where these two things collide.
So you can kind of ride a longboard wave, but with the manoeuvrability of a shortboard, and
Yeah, like you have the speed
around.
of a shortboard, but you draw the lines of a longer board. You know, you're sort of picking, like you're going way out to the shoulder, and then you're doing these big swooping turns back into the pocket, and it's, you know, it's super graceful and fluid, and you know, all those kind of things that you want to attach to it.
Yeah.
Just because of the nature of the being out of the water.
Yeah.
You know, there's no chatter, there's no bump, you're just gliding.
Silence.
Yeah.
Total silence.
And it's so weird to watch sometimes, because, you know, from a visual standpoint, when you see a guy ripping a wave, you're seeing like big sprays flying out the back of the wave. You see his track, you know, and those are all the things that sort of are ingrained in your mind
as to what you should be doing,
as
like chucking buckets,
what you should be seeing. And then you see this guy on a wave that the foil just cuts through the water, and it's almost like a zipper. It just closes right behind the foil and doesn't even leave a trace. And yeah, I don't know, it's just
kind of magical.
Yeah, it is, really.
And so if we go back a little bit to where we sort of started the conversation, you know, you were saying that you grew up in Hawaii, you got into surfing at a young age. When did surfing become more serious for you? When did it start to become something that you're like, okay, I know you got into windsurfing, but, you know, what sort of stages did it go for you from sort of leaving school and stuff like that?
Right. So when I was 6, we moved pretty close to the beach, close enough that my house was kind of like the sort of home base. Everybody would leave their surfboards at my house.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we'd dawn patrol it before school. You know, we'd have a little surf in front of the house, and or after school. And so, you know, when I was, you know, under 10 even already, I was surfing like every day. And between 10 and 15, same thing. Surfing was my thing.
Yes. What you
just
did.
Completely for fun. You know? And then when I was 15, I learned how to windsurf, and that was a game changer for me, because I lived on a windy side of the island.
Yeah.
Where the quality of surf wasn't great, but there was always wind. And there was something about it, even back then, like that was 1976 sometime around then. Even back then, the boards were big, but there was something about, you know, combining the wind and the surf and all that. Like, it grabbed me so hard that just became like my thing. Like, I was windsurfing every day, and I would just surf occasionally, and then over the next 10 years, that just developed into a full-on career for me.
Yeah, because you're a professional windsurfer, right? Competing and doing events, and kind of around that time that Robbie was doing his thing as well. So
yeah, there was a lot of luck with the timing of it all for me.
Yeah.
Like, I was just getting out of high school when the professional windsurfing tour was just being developed, and at that point in time, I kind of had a sense of where I was on the world stage, or the world, you know, level.
Yeah.
And you know, I said, hey, you know, I could maybe do some damage here.
Yeah.
So
take some people down.
So, you know, and you know, Rob lived in my in the bay, and, you know, I sailed with him a lot, and that was the ultimate benchmark.
So you're like, okay.
Yeah, you know, I could see where I was, where he was. If he was the world's best, I was like, okay, I must be somewhere near there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, let's find out.
See where it goes.
Yeah. And so I, you know, decided to get on the tour right out of high school, and pursued that for 10 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And back then there was quite a bit of money involved in windsurfing, right? Because it was kind of this boom sport. So it was, I don't know, it felt like there was more money, you know, Peter Stevenson, all these sort of big sponsors were sponsoring events. I don't know if that filtered to the riders or not, but from an outsider, there was a windsurfer looking in and reading all the magazines. It was like Jim Beam sponsoring this, and, you know, all this kind of people throwing money at this super cool new sport. So did that filter down to you guys at the top level, or?
It did. It was a really good time in the sport, and for a couple of reasons. One, again, timing. Like, if you think about the early 80s in Europe, especially, and Japan, this is like pre-snowboarding. This is really sort of I don't want to say pre-surfing, because guys were surfing in Europe.
Yeah.
But windsurfing was, at that point in time, kind of Europe's surf sport.
Yeah.
And so that represented, for, you know, a big part of Europe, France and Germany, to a large degree. What summer was all about. Like it was a great marketing tool. It was being used, mainstream, and so that translated into healthy sponsorship for the tour, and at the same time the sport itself was growing. So the manufacturers were all pretty healthy and robust, and the manufacturers actually ran the tour for the first handful of years at the WSMA, and it was pretty cool. In fact, I have to admit, it was very cool being a pro back then, because all the manufacturers were trying to outdo each other.
Yeah.
And so
we're going to throw this much money.
They would,
this much up.
You'd go to these events, and I mean, let me give you an example how it was. And I don't want to come across as trying to sound I don't know. I'll just tell you how it was. I mean, because it is quite different now. But so, for example, with the Mistral team at that point in time, they had a team manager, and he organized car sponsors for us. So we had, I think one year we had Mercedes, the next year we had Audi, and we would show up for an event in Germany, for example, and we'd get to the airport and they'd hand us over the keys to our cars.
Wow.
Sometimes our cars with our names painted on the side of them. I mean, it was pretty crazy. Yeah. And then you drive to the event. They take your gear in a separate van.
So you didn't even have to take your gear.
No.
You rock up at the airport, get given the keys to a car, and then all your stuff goes there.
And mind you, at that time, we had a ton of gear, like literally between.
Yeah, because the boards were huge, weren't they?
12-foot race boards, and of course you needed two. Then you needed your slalom boards. You needed all the race sails, slalom sails,
tons of kit,
all your wave gear. So you really had like a massive amount of stuff. So they were a huge help in that way. And then you get to the event, and then they have these containers all set up in these mobile homes and things, and with heaters, and sometimes they had like a medical team there for you in case you got injured. We had with Gastra, we had a guy travel with us the whole year with a sewing machine, and you could do modifications to your product, to your sail, like
as you're going.
Yeah, as you're going. Like if you're finding that your sail, like the leech is a little too tight, you want to loosen it up,
the sail maker's there, he'll just
do it right there. Or, of course, any repairs you need were done. We had guys doing board repair. I mean, it was really a different time. Yeah. And it was cool. I mean, for me, that was the point. I mean, it didn't take very long at all. It was that point in time when I sort of made a pact with myself, saying, I want to be in this for the long run, in some shape or form, And so I took it seriously, and I
worked hard at it.
Yeah, this is what I was going to do.
Yeah. And so you did 10 years as a pro windsurfer. What did you do after that? Where was the journey taking you there?
That was interesting. So I kind of sort of pulled out of the professional side of things. I don't want to say sooner than I should have, but it was, I felt like I had the skill. I just didn't really have the mindset. Like, I became world champ in what I was going after, which is wave performance. Yeah. And I stopped doing all the racing side of things at one point, and I was just a wave guy. And but then I was like, okay, so what am I going to do here? Am I going to just try to be world champ, like, 2-time world champ, 3-time,
Yes, and then where do you go?
Yeah, and there were some really interesting things happening all around the sport. Like, there was still all this sponsorship and people wanting people like myself to go off and do promotional work for these companies. And so I did some work for a German brand for a few years. Well, actually, it turned out to be about 8 years after that. And so I had this kind of hybrid sort of professional career where I was doing a lot of promotional work. I was doing a lot of work for my industry sponsors. And I also became a little bit more involved in the marketing.
Right.
And so I was working with Gastra at the time, and they were based in Hong Kong. And not to say they weren't doing a great job, but it felt to me, as somebody who was like really in the sport, that they were just a little bit disconnected from the market. Like, they had these ad agencies in Hong Kong doing their work at the time. I think they had BBDO at that time, which is, as you know, like one of the top ad agencies at the time. But their advertising was very slick and clean, and it just didn't really like touch the heart of
what windsurfing was about.
Yeah, and it was almost like it could have been a car ad or something.
Right.
And so I made a pitch. I actually contracted an artist in Maui to do some layouts, and I took them to Gastra, and I said, listen, this is what I want to do. This is the direction I'd like to take it. You want to give me the account? And I completely just
winged it,
yeah. And they're like, okay, let's do it.
So they went from world's top ad agency to Pete Cabrinha based on some sketches that you'd had drawn up in Maui.
Pretty much.
On a chance.
Pretty much. And,
wow.
And to make things more interesting is that I had a real interest in doing graphic design at the time, but I had no formal training.
Yeah.
And so I went out and spent, you're going to laugh about this, I bought an Apple computer.
Yeah.
This is 1991. An Apple computer, a printer, the monitor, all the stuff.
All the bits to go with it.
Just take a guess at what I spent on that.
Oh, I have no idea. Back then, probably quite a lot of money.
Back then, to do...
Because it was a proper design tool, the Mac, back then. You only had it if you were doing design. It's not like now where everyone has a Mac.
But
then it was for design.
True, but it was still at such infancy. But to get the setup that you needed to do this, it was $15,000.
Whoa.
Yeah, crazy. But I was committed. I was like, I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm doing this. And so, I bought the stuff and I just put my head down and I figured out how to become a graphic designer.
Wow.
And I was kind of moonlighting at the time, I mean, I was still really, really engaged as a pro athlete, but I was doing the
extra stuff for Gastra and all that marketing and stuff.
And then that sort of segued into when Rob split off from Gastra and did Nash.
That's Robbie Nash. Yep. So he split and did his Nash thing.
Right. So we, Don Montague and myself came over, and I started doing what I was doing for Gastra, for Nash.
Okay.
And so I kind of had this sort of duality going at the time, which was fun. It was
something different.
Yeah. And then in this sort of scheme of things, as time went on, kite surfing. Well, I guess tow surfing actually came into play before that.
Yeah.
So that was like '93.
Because you were pretty big in tow surfing. Did you get like the Big Wave of the Year award one year for a tow in?
Yeah.
That was what, 96 or something? Or
that actually didn't happen till
or was that later?
2004.
Okay, so a lot later on that was.
Yeah.
But you was towing right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It certainly seems like if something new comes along, you seem drawn to it. Are you one of these guys that likes learning something new and likes the challenge of it, like with the graphic design, with the learning to windsurf as soon as you saw it with, tow surfing, I'm going to get into that, and now with surfboarding and things, do you see something new? And obviously kite surfing, when that happened, do you see something and just feel, I want to learn that, I want to absorb it and get into it?
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty accurate thing about me. But the other thing was that it, like tow surfing wasn't something that we saw from a distance. We were actually part of that, the whole
scene,
genesis of it.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother long
story.
Yeah.
We'll do that in part 2 when we meet again. We'll come to Maui.
But it all sort of came down to the group of guys that I was hanging out with.
Yeah.
Which were all really creative and top, mostly windsurfers.
Yeah.
At the time.
And top athletes at their game, and obviously Robbie was building his company up and things like that.
Yeah.
And then obviously, where did Cabrinha as a business come into it? When did you start doing your own thing?
So I was working with Rob for Nash, and He was just getting into the kite surfing. I think Don Montague had developed the kites for Nash, and
I guess this was what, 99 or 98 maybe, or a bit later perhaps, because Robbie was a touch after the
I want to say could have been a little earlier. That would have been more like maybe 97, 98, perhaps. And yeah. That's sort of when it began. Anyways, I was really into the sport. And there wasn't a lot of equipment around, so I started doing boards. Under the Cabrinha label.
So that was the first sort of own Cabrinha brand product that was out there with the kite surfing boards.
And then it became a bit difficult to have, a board label working for Nash and everything. So I left Nash, and I was gonna just do this board thing, and a mutual friend of mine connected me with Neil Pride.
Okay.
And at first I thought Neil was just interested in doing the boards. On a larger scale, but of course, he's got the factories and he had the distribution, and he was interested in doing kites as well under the Cabrinha label. So that's where
a real kind of genesis,
that's when it really
moment.
And that by the time that came together, that was 2000.
Okay. And that's when Cabrinha, as we know it, was Cabrinha, part of Pride Group.
Exactly.
Making kites and boards. And
exactly.
The whole package.
And it was, it was really cool and fun time. I mean, it's great for your ego for about 10 minutes, and then it's like, okay, now
I've got to do the
buckle
job.
down and deliver.
And
it, I mean, and we haven't stopped. I mean,
it's been a pretty incredible journey, because for people that don't know, Cabrinha is a kite surfing brand, and it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in the industry. I think there's like 3, maybe 2 people now at the top, and you're definitely one of them that's producing huge numbers of kites and boards and product going all around the world. It must be quite satisfying when you see kites in the sky and think, that's got my name on it. I've had a part in that and making that person happy. For sure. I mean, I'm clearly proud of everything that my team has done. We've got amazing people working for us, and I can't take all the credit. I mean, really just a fraction of what's being put into it by everyone. In the early days, you mentioned the team there. How many people started Cabrinha in 2000? Say, was it just you and a few people? It was myself, and I had a marketing assistant, and we had a designer doing the kites at the time. In fact, it was Bruno Legano. Helped us get into the business, so he did some designs for us and gave us the know-how to build these kites. And I was doing all the board designs at the time and doing all the marketing. It was really, for as large of a company as we actually could have potentially been, being inside of the Pride Group, we were a real grassroots operation. Real small. Yeah. And did you get much financial backing from the Pride Group, or was it kind of like, you guys have to go and sell kites and make money, and we're not going to throw loads of cash at it? Or was there always the backing of the Pride Group that kind of gave you the confidence? Yeah, there was sufficient backing. Yeah, for sure. And we had a moment of truth right in the beginning that made it clear to me that these guys were in it. Yeah. And so we rolled out our first range of kites, and I apologize for anybody who's listening that may remember that time. We had these great designs, and we actually got the wrong spec on this bladder material for the kites. Right. And so when we rolled out, there was a lot of excitement. Big noise. Yeah, people were grabbing these kites, snatching them up and going off on holiday, and then they were having the kites deflate on them, like after one session. And we took us a little while to really figure out what was wrong, what happened. And it came down to a pretty simple thing. We were supposed to use polyether TPU, which is the material. It's a real medical grade TPU for the bladders, and they purchased polyester. And didn't tell you about it. Yeah, didn't tell us about it, and thinking that
they're one and the same, but they weren't. One is basically biodegradable.
Yeah. And so it's just degrading as soon as, as soon as it comes
and
out
so
the factory.
what happened at the time was we were getting warranties left and right, like immediately, and so we were FedExing replacement bladders all over the world at this just outrageous cost, and supporting the customer, and this came at a huge cost to the company. Of course, we eventually found out what the problem was, and we fixed it. There was, some immediate damage to the reputation that we had to climb
really
uphill to overcome. But
that's tough when you're launching a company.
Yeah. But it said to me that, the way that, Neil just, I was losing sleep. I mean, literally, it was
Stressful.
tough, for sure. And he was a lot more cool about it and calm. And he says, we're just going to do what it takes. And I was like, all right, I'm with the right guys here.
Yeah. They're going to look after you and see you through any rough times and help out where they can.
Yeah.
Rather than be, you're on your own working out.
And, he had obviously had a lot of experience in, issues that they've had, maybe perhaps in no pride windsurfing over the years. So, he just sort of kept a cool head and just said, we'll get
over it.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And kiteboarding's changed a lot since those early days. I know Cabrinha was one of the brands that in 2005, was it? Bought the Switchblade, the first bow kite to market. That must have been a pretty exciting time, because kiteboarding, obviously, as you know, was quite hard before that point. You couldn't relaunch kites easily. You were crashing them and people were struggling to get them up. And I had a school at the time, and you basically spent your whole time relaunching a kite for a student. And then with those bow kites, that was a game changer. It just literally pull a line and up the kite goes. That must have been quite exciting to come across that with Bruno and be developing that kind of stuff, knowing that you had something that was going to really change the face of kiteboarding forever.
Yeah, I really felt it in my gut that was going to be a real game changer. But it was really surprising how divided everyone was at the time, even internally. I have to admit, I was really sort of pushing this thing through, and I had support with the rest of my team. When I say team, I'm talking this sort of internal development team. Yeah. They're like, we'll make this. We'll see where this goes. But at the same time, we had developed an entire range of traditional kites for that season, and we were just about. In fact, I think we had pushed the production button already, and had started to make some of those kites. But I sat down for a conversation with Neil, and he just said, well, what do you think? And I said, man, I really think this is it. Like, this is what's going to happen. Like, everything that I had been looking for until then, a kite that depowers quickly, something that you have a lot more, control over the power of the kite versus something that just sort of constantly pulled, is going to make it not just safer, but it's going to boost the performance, like on the performance side of things. And so it was sort of this double, reasons to go after this. And he says, well, why are we making these other kites? And I said, I'm not exactly sure, maybe as backup. And he says, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to make these traditional kites? And I said, I don't know. I think I want to go all in. And we did.
Full gamble.
Yeah. And
it paid off.
It did, yeah.
Because the market lapped it up. And I mean, these days there's people that learn to kite that don't even know anything other than a bridle style kite that relaunches easily, has power control, that you can control the power. They've just come down, done a kite surfing lesson, and it's easy. They're learning really quickly.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even know the importance of those decisions and how that's changed the face of kiteboarding,
I mean,
I guess.
There's some history behind that decision as well. I mean, because we had lost our U.S. distributor. He actually had a fatal crash on launch. It was a really sad story, and one of our reps as well. And in both cases, they were just human error. Just small mistakes. that people make.
That you pay a big price for because
and nobody should pay that kind of ultimate price. And I just, I was like, man, if we're going to be in this business, we can't be in a sport that just doesn't allow people to just make a mistake like that.
Yeah.
And so that was really the driving
force behind looking for something that offered this extra control and safety.
Yeah. And I had a young daughter at the time, and I was like, what am I going to give her to ride? Do I want to take that chance? And so it really seemed like a big gamble, but on the other hand,
it was a sound decision-making process when you look at it like that.
For sure. And I think people figure that out pretty soon after.
Yeah. Well, now everyone's doing it, and kite surfing's a much safer place.
Yeah.
For those kites,
And I think everybody saw what happened after that in terms of the growth. Like, it's not just safer, but it's suddenly families and, kids and wives and, people that maybe kind of were standing on the sidelines going, I don't know.
This looks a bit sketchy.
It went from this sort of extreme sport label to just a sport.
Yeah, it's something people can engage in easily without thinking they might not come home from the beach.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is always a tough way when you're driving down and thinking, it's windy today, this could be a sketchy one. And nowadays you go out with a 5-meter kite in 55 knots of wind and it's no drama.
Yeah. It still can, if you make mistakes, you can put yourself in a bad place, but that's up to you.
Yeah. And you've got a bit of time and you've got to make those mistakes. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, I know you're really big into your art, and you mentioned that you taught yourself to do graphic design and stuff. Have you always been into art, or is that something that's come later in life? Or
yeah, it's always been a sort of a thing. I don't know. I think if you're an artist, it's kind of always there, lurking in the background, sort of always trying to push its way into your life. My mom was an artist. And so
you grew up around painting?
Yeah, she would go and paint on location and drag us kids around. And
you'd be playing around in the foreground.
Yeah, exactly. So there's some DNA maybe in that, but it's been something that I'm just super passionate about, and part of the reason is because I'm so busy with everything that the art always kind of gets the low priority.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I'm always wanting to do. Yeah.
Because you don't have as much time as you maybe like. So
exactly.
It's like always driving you to want to do more of it.
Yeah, but when even by saying that, I've put some effort into it, quite a bit over the years, and trying to cultivate my thing and my style, and I'm really into it now. I have more time, or I try to make more time.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty into it. I got a show coming up this winter.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
On Maui?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So something I've got to get busy.
Yeah, creating lots and lots and lots of stuff to put on the walls ready for the show.
Yeah.
I guess that gives you a goal to sort of work towards. You've got a date now that you're like, right, well, I've got to take some time out for that, because otherwise the gallery won't be ready.
I like it that way. It's, stressful, but it brings out the best.
Yeah.
I think.
Kind of a good driver.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm going to do a lot of work, and the cream will rise to the top, I guess, hopefully, and I'll have a few pieces that I feel are worthy.
And another thing I just want to touch base on quickly is you've got a passion for travel. You very kindly signed this amazing photo for me, taken by James, actually. That's good. But some of the trips that I've seen you guys do, because obviously working for a magazine, you send stories and things like that. There's been some incredible adventures that you've been on over the years, with things like the Cabrinha quest and stuff like that. Is there any one place that you've been to that really sticks out in your mind that you're constantly thinking, oh, I want to go back there, that was so good?
Yeah, there's a few, and they're both related, or they're all related to the quest trips. For kiteboarding, especially kite surfing, I have a thing for the South Pacific.
Yep.
There's a ton of spots that are not really easy to get to, but if you have a boat, you can.
But it's still a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's still a lot of effort for sure. But when you're there and it's on, it's really like no other.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So would this be was it Out of Nowhere film that you guys did, or
Yeah.
So that would be where you're talking about.
That's one of them. Yeah.
We'll put a link to that in the description. So
The
people can
Value
check
of
it out.
Nowhere.
The Value of Nowhere. Yeah, that's the one.
And then the Marshall Islands are a place. It's geographically not that far from Hawaii.
Okay.
Like you can take a 4.5-hour flight to get to the main island. But then from there, you need to either fly a little small plane or jump on a boat and sail. And you can get yourself into some pretty wild
conditions.
Yeah. When I say wild, I mean just, it's wild. Like
middle of nowhere, like no help for miles around. If anything goes wrong, you're like on your own making sound decisions based on the fact that you can't get medical attention.
Exactly. And the first trip I went on there, it was pretty interesting. I got an email from a boat captain. At the time, it was the Best Odyssey.
Yeah.
And
was that Gavin?
Gavin.
Yeah, Gavin Leclerc. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah, super guy. And so Gavin emailed me, and I'd never met him. He just said, "Hey, Pete, want to invite you on the boat." And he goes, I've got a spot for you if you're interested, but you got to get to Majuro by Friday, and this is Wednesday. And so I'm like, well, I got to make a quick decision. I'm like, so I email him back right away. I said, "Hey, Gavin, where are we going?" And he emailed me back a few words. He says, "I can't tell you." And I'm just like, okay, I'm in. And
fantastic.
It was a cool situation. He had got these coordinates from another captain and didn't want to, or I guess that was the deal, like couldn't
share it,
couldn't put it out there. And so I committed to it, not knowing where we were going. Although, of course, I was on Google Earth and I'm like, oh, for sure, we're going here. This looks like a killer setup. I was completely wrong.
Wow.
And we ended up in a place that was just really amazing.
Just mind-blowing.
Yeah. We landed on one island, and the locals claimed that they hadn't seen another sort of sailboat, just, tourists like us, who had just sailed through there for 3 years.
No way.
Yeah. So they, there's a supply boat that comes and
drops off stuff for them, but
they trade copra for, supplies but yeah, and really just completely off the grid.
Awesome.
And the water is just alive. Like you stick your head underwater and there's just every kind of fish you can imagine, from sharks to pelagics to, we caught probably 100-pound ahi, like a yellowfin tuna.
Yeah.
Like 100 yards off this island where we were surfing.
No way.
I mean, so you could be sitting in the lineup and really anything could swim past you. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Wow. That must have been a fantastic experience. And then because that was when it was the Best Odyssey, and then obviously now it's the Cabrinha Quest, or I think it still kind of is at the moment, or it was for a certain period of time. Did that kind of cement in your head that this is something I want to get behind? I've got to be involved in this more.
Yeah, it was a life-changing trip for me, for sure. And I wasn't much of a sailor, and maybe not at all. So that was really kind of I sort of got thrown into it. And I enjoyed it a lot. And so when the Odyssey wrapped up, Gavin decided to do it again. But this time, instead of going around the world, they wanted to just stay in the Pacific.
Yeah,
for
where
5
all the good
years.
spots were.
And he wanted to know if we were interested in being a part of it. So we paired up and did the quest.
Yeah.
And that has just wrapped itself up.
Yeah, that's
the
finished
5
now.
years, yeah.
So you've had a few trips on that and
Yeah.
had some good times.
Yeah.
It is an amazing boat. I was lucky enough to go on it in 2008, I think, when it was the Best Odyssey still. And we went to Los Rocos and it was just incredible. And Gavin, and it was just an amazing boat, an amazing experience, fantastic, really good. So I can see why that would invoke such passion in you, that you're just like, wow, this is something we've got to be involved in. It's awesome.
and again, it sort of comes back to just kiteboarding in general, like the sport that we're in and the kind of brand that we want to be. I feel like we're a very technical brand. I mean, we spend the lion's share of our time in development and R&D and putting these very technical products through production. But at the same time, I feel like it's not about that as much as it's about the sport.
Yeah.
And the lifestyle itself. And so for as much energy as we put into, making these tech products, the way we want to use them is something completely different. You know? I want people to buy them for what they can do for them, as opposed to what they have in them. You know?
So how it makes them feel and where it can take them.
And so trying to showcase that in every way that we can, is something we like to do, I think.
Yeah. So part of the marketing is like, look, this could take you here, and you can do this with this product, rather than, hey, it's got this inside and it's got that inside, and going from that. If you had to, because you are an exceedingly accomplished waterman. You're good at towing, you're good at paddling, you're good at foiling, you're good at kiting, windsurfing, and everything like that, and you've kind of reached an exceedingly high level in all those sports. If you had to pick just one that you were only allowed to do for the rest of your days, which one would it be?
Well, what's the one word that's part of every one of those sports?
Surf.
Yeah.
So it'd be surfing.
Yeah. Everything I do is, whether it's, kite surfing, tow surfing, windsurfing, it's all part of surfing. So that to me is at the core. The core, yeah.
That's the center of it.
That's what I want to do, is I want to surf, like ride waves any way I can.
And if you could pick one spot anywhere in the world to go and surf, because that's the one sport you're allowed to do now.
Wow.
And you can go tomorrow, but time doesn't matter. You've got a time machine to get you there. Which spot would you choose and why?
Wow. I hadn't thought about that.
I haven't got a plane ticket for you, don't worry.
Can I pick more than one?
You can pick two. I'll let you go for two. This could get expensive if I was buying the plane tickets.
Man.
There must be so many good spots that you've ridden over the years. This is probably why it's such a tough question, because it's like, how do you...
You know what I would say? I would probably say Fiji and a wave like Cloudbreak, maybe.
Okay. Good choice.
I'll tell you why. I mean, you see it in photos, it looks perfect.
Yeah.
But part of the thing is that it's not perfect. It's a pretty quirky wave at times, and if, it's kind of like if someone asks you if you wanted to eat a type of food, you probably, for the rest of your life, one type of food for the rest of your life, you probably want to eat something that in some way
a bit different,
would taste a bit different day by day. Otherwise, you get completely bored of it.
Okay.
So Cloudbreak, on any given day, kind of has these different moods to it.
So it throws up some different challenges and different conditions.
Yeah, it can be super playful and fun. It can be scary. It can be all of that. Yeah. So I would say Cloudbreak.
Wow.
It'd be challenging for sure.
So that's it, surfing Cloudbreak for the rest of your days, Pete.
Yeah.
Not a bad way to end it. Thanks for that, Pete. That's been a really insightful conversation. I've really enjoyed that. I've learned some things there that I didn't know. So it was nice to talk about some of the windsurfing stuff from back in the day, because I was an avid windsurfer back then. So yeah, that was really great. I think that's a nice point to end it on. So thanks, Pete, for giving me the time and melting in the boiling hot van and struggling with your European flu.
Cheers.
There we have it. Episode 5 is done and dusted. It was great to chat to Pete, and I really enjoyed some of his stories and hearing about his experiences from around the world. If you enjoyed the last 50 minutes, then please give this podcast a rating on iTunes or wherever you're tuning in. Share it with your friends on social media, or maybe even tell them about it in real life down the pub. I'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to tune in then. You've been listening to Intriguing Beings with me, Rou Chater.